My fiancée reconnected with her high school friend on Facebook. Turns out, she wasn't just reminiscing, she was rehearsing a whole new life without me. If you'd asked me 6 months ago what would end my relationship, I would have guessed something dramatic. A screaming match in a parking lot, a discovered hotel receipt, maybe even one of those ring camera horror stories Reddit loves. I wouldn't have said a Facebook friend request from 2009 with a sun-bleached profile photo and a timeline full of minion memes. And yet, here we are. I'm 33, she's 31. I'll call her Erin because typing my ex still stabs a little. We met at a trivia night where she confidently wrote Cape Canaveral and underlined it twice, even though the question was about the capital of Florida. We still won because we're that couple. She's charming chaos. I'm a human spreadsheet. 4 years together. Shared lease. A dog named Lenny who looks like a small loaf of bread with eyes. Cohabitation rituals like matching Sunday groceries, and the smugness of splitting our utilities exactly to the penny on Splitwise. We were ordinary in a way that felt like safety. A Tuesday night in March, Erin was on the couch scrolling, cackling at whatever their algorithm feeds you when you've liked too many goth cottagecore posts. I was in the kitchen making pasta and pretending jarred sauce counts as cooking. She said, casual as weather. Oh wow, blast from the past. I asked who without looking up. She flashed me her phone. Dylan Harper. Name didn't ring a bell. The photo was a guy in sunglasses on a boat. That generic, man-enjoying sun-related object energy. Caption, back at it, Lake PPL. I shrugged. She said, we had AP English together. He was nice. She pressed, confirm. If you've never watched a relationship die in a comment section, here's the play-by-play. At first, it's harmless. He likes old photos of our dog. She reacts to his post about his mom's retirement party with a... He comments, remember when Ms. Barlow made us read the yellow wallpaper and you said it was camp? Erin answers, it is camp. She's not wrong. And they lock into one of those rapid-fire threads that make you feel like you walked into a movie 2 scenes late. It's cute. I'm not a jealous person. I have exes. She has exes. The internet is a graveyard of people we used to know. Then it shifts. Tiny clicks in the machinery you don't hear until the engine stalls. Notifications come at odd hours. He tags her in a 10 albums that changed your life chain, like it's 2014 on purpose. She fills it out like she's auditioning for a mood board. He replies to every single one with a paragraph and a memory. Remember when you burned me that mixed CD junior year? You were the first person to put maps next to an inn. Erin's eyes glow that retro nostalgia glow you get when someone reminds you of who you were before your job started mailing you fleece vests. I told myself it was sweet. People reconnect, they swap anecdotes, and then go back to tax season. The second week, I started noticing the micro behaviors. Erin angling her phone away reflexively when I walked past. Not secretive, just careful. The new lock screen, photo from a hike we took last fall, which is either romantic or camouflage. The new habit of laughing at something and then not sharing the joke like she usually does. None of these are crimes, they're crumbs. Who's Dylan? I asked one night while Lenny snored between us, making small bread sounds. Erin said, old friend, I told you. In that light neutral tone that says, drop it without saying, drop it. I did. 3 weeks in, their messaging moved from Facebook to Instagram DMs, blue check Hunger Games for the soul, and from there to text, because IG compresses videos too much. Erin narrated none of this. I'm just not dumb. She started using the bathroom more, phone in hand. Our dinners added a third invisible plate for whoever was in the rectangle. The first hard ping on my radar was a coffee cup. Saturday morning, she was out running errands and sent me a photo. Toes and sneakers, our downtown sidewalk, her holding a latte with a heart in the foam. Caption, needed this. It was the background blur, 2 hands on the table edge. One of them was not hers. Big knuckles, a silver ring. I zoomed in like a creep and still told myself anything other than, she got coffee with him and didn't mention it. People run into people. Downtown is small, coffee is coffee. I'm the king of rationalization. There should be a crown. That night, we lay in bed scrolling. Her phone lit up with a notification banner. Dylan, you're impossible. She tapped the screen so fast, the text blinked away, and then she overplayed it with a yawn. Long day, she said. Target was a war zone. I said, did you see anyone while you were out? And she said, ran into Julie from the gym. and my stomach made a small accordion sound. I didn't snoop. I've never gone through a partner's phone. It's a line I won't cross because once you cross it, you start living like a cops and robbers reenactment. Instead, I listened. The new laugh, the new playlist. Erin has always been a music person, but now we had sudden, aggressive early 2000s curation. A song would come on and she'd say, "God, I haven't heard this since sophomore year," and get that soft look like she could see her old bedroom poster wall. I made a joke. "Who are you, and what have you done with my girlfriend?" She said, "Maybe I'm just remembering the parts of me I lost," and smiled. And I said nothing, because I don't ever want to be the villain in someone else's coming-of-age sequel. The first crack big enough to see daylight, of Facebook memory. Erin reposted an old prom photo. Her in a dress the color of a bruise, hair teased to Jesus, eyeliner like an angry fairy. Someone commented, "OMG baby Erin," and then Dylan commented, "Wildest night of my life," with a winky face. Erin replied, "You wish." Their friends dogpiled with in-jokes. I didn't get any of them. She didn't explain. It bothered me more than it should have. In April, Dylan's posts turned into humble brags. New job contract. Finally out of that toxic situation, Erin responded with, "So proud of you," and 3 claps, and he replied with a red heart. Not the default like, the comment heart, which means you had to press a button and think about it. Later, in the kitchen, she told me a story about her coworker's cat, and the way she avoided my eyes felt like a speed bump. I want to be fair to myself in this memoir of red flags. I said something. 3 times, in fact. Version 1 was gentle. "Hey, I'm feeling weird about how much you're on your phone with Dylan," she said. "We're just catching up." Version 2 was boundary adjacent. "I'd like to meet him," she said. "Totally. We kept missing each other downtown. It's not a big thing." Version 3 was a hand on the table. Steady voice. "It feels like you're building a separate space that I'm not in." She frowned and said, "You have work. You have your woodworking class. I can have a friend." Which is true. It's also not what I meant. You'll ask, why didn't you insist? Why didn't you set a hard line? Because I've been the jealous boyfriend before, at 24, policing someone's friendships until I hated myself. Because Erin isn't property. She's a person with interiority I don't get to pothole. Because the fastest way to push a secret relationship into a romantic one is to play the security guard at the gate. Meanwhile, the universe fed me tiny humiliations on a slow-release drip. I found a receipt in her jacket for a beer garden I'd never been to. She said she went with coworkers. I believed her. I saw a photo on Dylan's story of 2 beers, one with a lipstick rim. I told myself, men wear tinted balm now. Progress is real. She came home one night smelling like cigarettes. She doesn't smoke, and said the patio was full of people. It was always true-ish. Then came the ask. Erin floated it while we were brushing our teeth, like she wanted the toothpaste foam to absorb any discomfort. "Hey, so, Dylan's band is doing a set at Kingfisher on Friday. Would you mind if I go? You hate loud bars." I spit, rinsed, looked at her in the mirror. "I don't mind loud bars," I lied. She said, "You mind this loud bar?" and smiled. I said, "I'll go." She hesitated. "It's a reunion thing. Just a lot of folks from high school. Might be more fun if we split errands and meet later." I nodded. Then I went to that bar anyway. Kingfisher is one of those places where floorboards stick to your shoes, and the bathrooms are archaeological digs. I stood by the fake ficus like a narc. Dylan's band isn't bad. They are exactly as good as you think a man with a boat profile photos band is. Competent, nostalgic, heavy on covers that make you feel 17 and invincible for 3.5 minutes. Erin was front row, hair down, face lit with stage light. She looked happy in a way that stabbed and warmed me at the same time because I am not a monster. She wasn't alone. A cluster of former teenagers in their 30s shrieked and sang into each other's faces. On the second set, Dylan did the thing. This one's for someone who reminded me who I was, and then launched into the strokes. Erin whooped. My stomach did a fish flop. I could have walked up. I could have said hi. Instead, I left. Cowardly? Maybe. Self-preservation? Also maybe. I sat in my car and counted the breaths between texts. Erin messaged me later. "Running late? You okay for dinner leftovers?" I typed, "How was the show?" She wrote, "Fun!" with 2 exclamation marks. Then, "Catching up with folks, heading home soon." I typed, "Cool," and put my phone face down so I wouldn't watch the typing bubble like a meteor. The first proof arrived like a practical joke. Facebook did the thing where it suggests people you might know based on shared hangs. It served me a photo of Aaron and Dylan tagged at a coffee shop with a caption from the shop. Loved having local musicians plus friends today. 2 hours earlier than her text, said she'd arrived at Kingfisher. It was nothing. It was everything. I clicked Dylan's profile like a raccoon grabbing a shiny thing. Public photo album. Spring. There she was in the corner of a group photo, his arm around 3 people and touching her shoulder. Not quite a claim. Definitely not nothing. This is the part in the movie where you yell at the screen, "Say something!" I did. The next morning, I made scrambled eggs and said, "I stopped by Kingfisher last night." Erin's fork paused just long enough to acknowledge the trap. She recovered. "You should have texted. I would have come out and said hi," I said. "I saw the coffee shop post." She said, "Yeah, we went early. It was a big group." I said, "You didn't mention the early part." She said, "I didn't think it mattered." I'm not proud of what I said next. What exactly is he to you? The lawyer tone. The courtroom demand. She set down her fork carefully, and for the first time there was anger. "A friend," she said. "A person from my life before you. I'm allowed to have those." We did the argument all couples eventually do. How close is too close? Where does transparency become surveillance? What counts as cheating when nothing physical has happened that you admit to? Is emotional intimacy with someone else an affair if your partner didn't consent to it? And why does consent feel like the wrong and also right word there? Erin said she felt alive talking to him, like the part of her that used to write in margins of books woke up. I said I wasn't trying to be a warden. She said I was treating her like a kid. I said I was watching her talk to a man for hours and lie about coffee hours, and I don't know what the word is, but it smells like smoke, even if I don't see fire yet. We both cried a little. We both apologized. We both did that post-argument cling where you overpromise. She said, "I'll put my phone down more." I said, "I won't make you feel policed." We made pancakes we didn't eat. We watched a baking show where British people whisper about Genoese and pretended soft television could sand the edges. For a week, it did. The week after, I came home to a small thing that detonated the larger thing. A paperback on the coffee table with a sticky note on the cover. Book. Norwegian Wood. Note. 4E. Dog-eared to my favorite passage. D. My mouth went dry. Erin walked in behind me with a reusable grocery bag and looked from the book to my face, like a person watching a cup fall in slow motion. "He swung by," she said quickly. "He had the book in his car. He was nearby. He texted. It was 5 minutes." My voice came out very calm. "You invited him here?" "No," she said. "I didn't invite him. He was passing by. He asked." I said, "Okay." I stared at the note like it might start smoking. Lenny sat down and wagged his tail because dogs believe in love by default. I didn't yell. I said, "This is our home." Erin said, "He was at the door for 5 minutes." I said, "He's in our living room via this book." Erin said, "You're making it mean something." I said, "It means he was here." She said, "Do you hear yourself?" And I said, "Do you?" And then we stood there breathing like tired runners. We tabled it. That's what we do when we don't want to break up, but the conversation is a saw. We put it on a high shelf and pretend it won't roll off in the night. For a few days, the book sat like a third roommate. I pretended not to read the dog-eared passage. I read it. It was underlined in pencil. It was about longing. I laughed in a way that wasn't funny. The message that moved the needle came on a Thursday, while Erin was in the shower. I was on the couch, Lenny doing a little donut at my feet, when her phone lit up with a preview because apparently the universe likes irony. Message bubble. "Dylan, that thing you said about being seen? Same. Last night felt like before everything got complicated." Another bubble attached to it. She'd turned on the show with text preview because she is a godless agent of chaos. "Don't freak out, but I can't stop thinking about your laugh." I stared at the screen like it was a snake. I put it face down, stood up, sat back down, said out loud to my empty living room, "We're not doing this." I didn't open it. I didn't scroll. I waited 10 minutes and then knocked on the bathroom door. "We need to talk," I said through the steam. Erin said, muffled, "Okay." She came out wrapped in a towel, hair piled up, smelling like eucalyptus in denial. I told her I saw the preview. I quoted it exactly. because I'm not a monster who misquotes to win. Her face went through 3 expressions I'd never seen: calculation, shame, defiance. She said, "He's being dramatic." I said, "Are you?" She said, "I don't know." It was the most honest thing she'd said in a month. We had the real conversation then, the one that strips you to nerve. I said the words, "emotional affair," which I hate because it sounds like a TED Talk, and she flinched. She said she hasn't touched him. I said she's touched him with everything else. She said she feels like herself with him. I said I thought she was herself with me. She said, "I don't know how to explain the missing piece thing without making you the villain." I said, "Maybe I can be the person who hears it without making you wrong for wanting more." And then I heard myself and wanted to slap me for auditioning for sainthood. We cried again. We agreed on a boundary. No one-on-one hangs for a month. No late-night texting. Full transparency about messages if either of us felt weird. She promised she'd tell him they needed to cool it. I promised I'd stop reading between every pixel. We hugged like people trying to transplant a heart. For 48 hours, it worked. Her phone stayed dark after 9. We made dinner. We even laughed. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Maybe we'd done it. The messy but grown-up thing where you steer out of a skid. Then Saturday, Aaron said, "I'm going to drop off that book to his place. It's literally on my way to Target." I looked up from my laptop slowly. "You said no one-on-one hangs." She said, "It's a drop-off, not a hang." I said, "I can come." She said, "That's weird." I said, "What's weird is the way we keep carving exceptions." She said, "It'll take 10 minutes." I said nothing. She left. 25 minutes later, she texted, "Running late. They were watching the game." They, plural. My chest loosened. I replied, "Okay." She came back an hour after that with Target bags and a small smile like she'd passed a test. I told myself I could do this. I told myself the worst was behind us. Sunday morning, Facebook pinged me with, "People you may know." Dylan's sister. Dylan's cousin. The algorithm had apparently decided I was now a Harper. I clicked Dylan's profile again. I know. A new photo from last night. A couch selfie. 4 people piled in. Game on in the background. Aaron at the edge. Not quite touching him, but leaning in to fit the frame. Caption: "Accidental reunion FTC or the best audience." A comment under it from Dylan, just to her. "When are you coming by again?" A reply from Aaron. "Haha, behave." I shut my laptop and stared at the plant on the windowsill until it blurred. You know that feeling where the shape of your reality tilts 5 degrees, and you think, if I hold very still, maybe it will tilt back. I held very still. If part 1 was the bend, part 2 is where the road iced over. Nothing snapped yet. It just never quite gripped again. Every day leaned a fraction of a degree more toward the ditch. We kept our boundary pact taped to the fridge like a chore chart. No one-on-one hangs, no late-night texting, transparency if either of us felt weird. For 48 hours, it worked. Then it became an obstacle course Aaron learned how to run without touching a single cone. It started with group contexts. She rediscovered a half-dozen humans from senior year homeroom, and suddenly there were trivia nights at O'Malley's again, impromptu drinks at the bowling alley lounge, backyard fire pits with acoustic guitars where someone played Wonderwall with a straight face. I got invited exactly once, which was worse than never. In a circle of people who could finish each other's stories from 2008, I was a closed captioning tourist. They used nicknames that didn't fit their current faces. They referenced pranks like they were war medals. Every time Dylan spoke, 3 heads turned in unison as if on a hinge. Aaron glowed under it like a plant moving toward a lamp. I tried standards on for size. Show up sometimes, bow out others, ask follow-ups like a supportive partner. How's his job? Is his mom still in remission? Does he always wear cologne that smells like a cedar chest full of unresolved issues? Aaron answered in friendly, measured doses. It didn't feel like infidelity. It felt like being slowly replaced by an anecdote I didn't belong in. The slide sharpened on a Tuesday when I discovered Venmo was bold enough to be plot. Aaron set her payments to friends only after college, but the feed still shows that you paid someone even if the note is private. At lunch, scrolling out of boredom, I saw the gray "Aaron paid Dylan." The emojis were nothing. The timestamp was everything. 11:48 p.m., Monday, an hour after she told me she was crashing early because of a headache. I stared at those 2 small icons, fire and pizza, and felt a very primitive part of my brain throw a rock. I asked that night, gently, because I hate the version of me who interrogates. She shrugged and said they dropped into a slice place after trivia, and she'd forgotten to mention it. The boundary on the fridge didn't say anything about pepperoni. A week later, Find My, yes, the app we both keep on because she loses her phone like it's a hobby, stopped updating for 3 hours on a Saturday, then snapped back to life with her little dot near Dylan's apartment complex. When I asked, she said they were at the park near there and her phone died. She held my eyes a beat too long. Lenny sniffed her jeans that night, like he'd found a new continent. I suggested couples counseling, not as a threat but as a rope. Erin stared into the middle distance and said she didn't want to pathologize a friendship. I said I didn't want to weaponize nostalgia into a wrecking ball. She said therapy would make it real. I said it already was. We got very quiet after that and watched half of a documentary about orcas, because sometimes you need a tragedy that doesn't involve you. The first physical clue wasn't lipstick on a collar, it was lint. A long black thread woven into the hem of Erin's gray sweater, threaded in a way that looked like it had been on someone else's coat. I picked it off and held it up between us like a curse. She laughed, genuinely confused, then a little defensive, then took the sweater and folded it with more care than sweaters merit. You can only live in ambiguity for so long before your nervous system starts writing checks your life can't cash. I began cataloging micro-evidence the way anxious people hoard spare batteries, the subway punch card with 2 extra stamps, the Uber receipt that pinged our shared email with the pickup address 1 block from Dylan's building, and a drop-off at a boutique hotel's curb because it was closer to the freeway. The new playlist on our shared Spotify full of his band's live demos, labeled For Later, that somehow got downloaded to her phone for offline playback. I held out for a long time against the worst version of me, the one who wants to snoop, to go full detective in the Notes app, to become a screenshot archaeologist. I failed one night when Erin fell asleep on the couch, screen unlocked in her hand, like a trap laid by a trickster god. I didn't open messages. I didn't need to. The lock screen preview did enough. Dylan, 12:14 a.m. Calling now? Phone icon. Then 3 minutes later, so I'm saying this out loud so it's not just in my head, today made sense. That was it. The universe is a careful editor. I woke her and said we needed to reset boundaries, or admit we'd failed them. She cried. The deep kind, not the performative kind. She said she didn't know why she felt split in half. She said he made her remember someone she used to like, and that she didn't know if that was the person she needed to be happy. She said she didn't want to lose me. I said I didn't want to police her into staying. We did the worst thing you can do in a storm. We promised to be better without changing maps. The turn from almost 2 has happened on a Wednesday with the dumbest catalyst. Printer ink. Erin texted she'd be late because she'd offered to help Dylan print flyers for a show. Printer at his place was down, as all male printers are. I said we had a printer. She said she was already near his place. 9:30 turned to 10, turned to 11. I watched the little Find My dot hover over his street until it became a screensaver for dread. At 11:42, she texted OMWW, which is the speedrun version of accountability. At 11:59, the door unlocked. She came in quietly, like quiet is the same thing as kind. Her hair smelled like his cologne, which is what colognes are for. When she saw me awake, she stiffened, then did the choreography. Small smile, soft voice, joke about the stupid flyers. I asked if I could see one. She said he kept them because quality control. She said it too fast. She went to the sink, washed her hands longer than needed, and I watched water bead on her wrist, where a faint smudge of Sharpie had been rubbed mostly off. There was a curve of black on her forearm like the tail of an ampersand. It looked exactly like the end of a handwritten an errand someone had tried to scrub. I didn't accuse. I said I needed breathing room. I booked myself a night at a cheap hotel near the office to reset my brain, which is the story I told myself instead of the truth. I couldn't stand to sleep in a bed that had started to feel like a jury box. The hotel had carpet that looked like it had opinions. I lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling and thought about all the soft ways people end each other. I thought about prom photos and book inscriptions and pizza emoji. I thought about how a life can turn if you laugh at the wrong joke for too long. When I got home the next evening, Erin had cooked. There were candles. The bookshelf had been dusted like a bribe. She said she wanted to try counseling. I felt something unclench that had been tightening for weeks. We ate and spoke like grown-ups. She showed me a message draft to Dylan that said they needed space. I watched her press send. She put her phone in a drawer. We sat on the couch and put on a bad movie, and leaned into each other like people trying to remember choreography after a long time away. At 10:16, her Apple Watch buzzed on her wrist, a small betrayer. She tilted it without meaning to. The display flashed just enough for me to read my new least favorite sentence. "If you're really drawing a line, tell me to my face." The sender wasn't labeled. It didn't need to be. She stared at her lap for a full minute. Then she stood, went to the bedroom, came back with her keys. She said she needed to close the loop in person. I said we could do it together. She said that was crazy. I said the boundary lives or dies on what you do next. She looked at me like I'd asked her to pick which parent to save in a fire. She left. I didn't follow. I took Lenny for a long walk in a loop around blocks we've walked 1,000 times. The night smelled like cut grass and imminent thunderstorms. When I got back, I sat on the porch. She came home an hour later, eyes red, face set. She said, "It's done." She said, "I told him we can't talk." She said, "I choose this." I believed her because you have to believe someone who looks like they just let go of the rope. The next morning, there was quiet. The day after, quieter. We made coffee. We made the bed. We made a plan to call a therapist whose website had soft colors and photos of satisfied potted plants. Erin texted me midday a photo of a ridiculous squirrel outside her office, like we used to text each other dumb wildlife. I let myself hope. 2 nights later, the hope fell apart in a way that would be almost funny if it didn't end a life. I was hunting for a PDF in our shared email. The cable bill subject line is a scavenger hunt every month, and I saw an auto-generated Gmail label, "Your Lyft ride with Dylan." Because apparently his phone is tied to his ride receipts, with his name in the subject line, and the universe has no chill. The email was from 1:08 a.m., the night she chose this. Pickup, our corner. Drop off, his street. I read the route like a punchline. I closed the laptop very calmly, and then laughed in a way that felt like air leaving a tire. I didn't kick down a door. I waited. At breakfast, I put my phone on the table like a warrant, and said there was a Lyft receipt. She went very still and very far away, then very present and very angry. She said, "You went through my emails?" And I said I was searching for Comcast and found a confession. She said it wasn't a confession, it was an argument in a car. I said arguments usually end at the end of a trip, not with a detour to his street. She said I was inventing a narrative. I said she was rewriting one. This is the moment people on Reddit love because it's clean. The gotcha with the receipts. The righteous speech. The suitcase on the curb. It wasn't clean. We didn't explode. We dripped. We took turns being quiet and then too loud. She said there was a kiss. Just one. I stared at the word one like I'd never seen it before. She said it was goodbye. I said most goodbyes don't taste like hello. She said she hadn't slept with him. I believed her, and also didn't, because belief is not binary. It's a slider, and mine had sand in it. We called the therapist. We went to 3 sessions. The therapist had kind eyes, and a bell she tapped when we spiraled. Erin described the missing piece. I described the pieces she'd taken and hid. The therapist asked who we were trying to save, the relationship or the people who would hate themselves if it ended. She asked what friendship meant if it required lying. She asked what love meant if it required deleting threads. Erin cried in a way that had nothing to do with me. I cried in a way that had everything to do with me. After the 3rd session, in the car, Erin said she needed a week to think. I said okay because consent is still the right word here. The week was an art installation of empty. I fed Lenny and rearranged the spice rack and walked aimless loops through the grocery store without buying anything. Erin stayed out late 3 nights. She said she was with the high school group. I didn't ask who specifically, because the answer would be the same name in a different sentence. On Friday, the algorithm did me the final favor. Instagram pushed a story into the top of my screen because it knew I hovered. It was Dylan at a diner booth, out of focus, someone across from him taking the video. The camera panned, and Erin slid into frame, laughing, trying to hide from the lens with her hand, which had a ring indentation where hers should have been, but wasn't, because she'd left it on the sink for lotion reasons. The caption, accidentally on purpose. The tag bubbles hovered, Erin and Adeline half cut off. The timestamp, 12:11 a.m. I watched it 3 times like a person prodding a bruise to make sure it still hurts. I didn't confront her that night. I put my phone face down and looked at the ceiling, and decided I was done running a moderation policy in a comment section of my own life. The next morning, I printed the Lyft receipt, a screenshot of the diner story, the Venmo pizza, the coffee shop post, the Find My Gaps. I didn't lay them out like a prosecutor. I stacked them like a resignation letter. When she walked in from a run with that flushed cheek color I used to love, I handed her the stack and said the quiet part out loud. I don't want to be in a triangle. She looked at the paper, then at me, and something slackened in her shoulders, like a knot undone the wrong way. She said she didn't either. She said she didn't know how to stop wanting to feel like a past version of herself. I said maybe the kindest thing we can do for those past versions is let them be past. She sat down on the floor, like the gravity in the room had changed. Lenny wandered over and put his head in her lap because he is built for mercy. That's where the slide ends and the drop begins. I didn't have proof of sex in a hotel room. I had a necklace of smaller proofs, each bead a decision. I had a week to pack, and a lease to unwind, and a dog who didn't understand custody. I had a therapist saying endings can be acts of love if you do them while you still respect each other. When people imagine breakups, they think of fireworks, screaming, slammed doors, tears splattering like rain on tile. Ours was quieter, and somehow more devastating. I chose the kitchen table because it felt neutral, less intimate than the couch where we'd watched 1,000 movies, less ceremonial than the bed where I couldn't bear to measure distance anymore. I placed the stack of evidence in the center, like a deck of cards I didn't want to play but had to. Erin came in from her run, cheeks flushed, hair damp against her forehead. She spotted the stack instantly. Her eyes darted from the papers to me. "What's this?" she asked, though her voice cracked like she already knew. "Everything," I said simply. First page, the Venmo pizza, time stamped late at night. Second page, the Lyft receipt, starting at our corner, ending at Dillon Street. Third, the Instagram diner story, her laugh frozen in pixels, timestamp glowing in the corner. Fourth, a screenshot of her location gap on Find My, a blank space in the middle of a Saturday. Not one of them was damning on its own. But together, they told a story she hadn't admitted to yet, the one I'd been forced to piece together like a puzzle with jagged edges. At first, she did what people do. She denied. "These don't prove anything," she said, flipping the pages with a hand that trembled just enough to betray her. "It's just hanging out. You're twisting it." I shook my head. "It's not one thing. It's all of them. And the thing you haven't told me." Her jaw tightened. "You think I slept with him?" she snapped. The room tilted. She'd said it out loud. Not, "We're just friends." Not, "You're imagining things." She'd skipped straight to defending the one thing I hadn't accused her of directly. "I think," I said slowly, "that you've been lying to me. And the lying is worse than whatever happened." Her shoulders sagged. Tears welled. She pressed her palms to her eyes like she could push them back in. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It was stupid. It was one kiss, maybe two. He makes me feel like I'm 17 again, and I wanted to feel that. Just once. Just once." The phrase echoed like a dropped coin in a deep well. I looked at her, at the woman I'd loved, lived with, laughed with, and felt the weight of what I had to say. "Do you want to be with him?" I asked. Her silence was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. She didn't say no, and that was my answer. I stood, slid the folder of proof back toward myself, and tucked it under my arm. "I'm done being the third wheel in my own relationship," I said. She reached out a hand, but let it fall before touching me. Her tears ran unchecked now, dripping onto the wood grain of the table we'd shared meals at for years. I walked down the hall, grabbed my bag, whistled for Lenny. His nails clicked on the hardwood as he followed me out the door. Breakups are private until they're not. The second you step out of the house with your duffel bag, the whole world starts to ask questions. And in our case, the world was full of people who had opinions, memories, and allegiances that didn't belong to just me. I went to my sister's again. She didn't say anything when I arrived, just let me crash on her couch with Lenny curled at my feet. In the morning, she brought coffee and waited until I'd taken a sip before asking, "So, it's done?" "Yeah," I said. "It's done." She didn't push. She'd never liked Erin, though she'd tolerated her for my sake. Now I could see relief flicker under her sympathy. When I told my parents later that day, my mom actually cried. She'd pictured Erin as a daughter-in-law, a permanent addition to every Thanksgiving table. My dad muttered, "Better now than later," which is what dads are programmed to say in these situations. Mutual friends are the collateral damage of betrayal. Some rallied around me immediately. They texted things like, "We had our suspicions," and "You deserve better." Others went radio silent, unwilling to pick a side. And a select few, the ones closer to Erin, bought her version of events, that it was just a mistake, that I'd overreacted. I didn't try to convince them otherwise. I just kept my folder of proof close, like a shield I didn't want to use but could at any moment. Then there was Dylan. It started with a text. "She told me, you know. I didn't want this to happen. It wasn't supposed to go this far." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. The arrogance of it. The gall to reach out like we were equals in some twisted love triangle. I didn't respond. What was there to say? "Thanks for ruining my life, buddy. But at least you're self-aware?" Still, the fact that he texted me meant he felt guilty. And guilt meant he knew he'd crossed a line. That was enough to confirm what Erin hadn't said out loud. We hadn't picked a date yet, but the talks had started. Venues, flowers, guest lists. Canceling wasn't a logistical nightmare, but emotionally, it was like scrubbing out a blueprint of the future. Every time I deleted a wedding inspiration email, it felt like erasing a part of myself that had been stupid enough to dream. It didn't take long before I started hearing what Erin was telling people. She claimed it was just nostalgia, a harmless reconnection that got misunderstood. She told people I was insecure, jealous, controlling, that I blew things out of proportion. The part of me that wanted revenge burned to blast the receipts to everyone we knew. But another part, the part that still loved her despite it all, couldn't do it. I didn't want to turn our collapse into public theater. Instead, I focused on myself. Therapy sessions, long walks, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned, relearning how to live without constantly wondering who she was texting or where she really was. And slowly, I found peace. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe never. But a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. By the time weeks had passed, the storm had moved from a daily hurricane to a steady drizzle. It was still there. The ache, the anger, the endless questions. But it no longer drowned me every morning when I opened my eyes. What remained was the quieter work of rebuilding. 2 weeks after I left, Erin showed up at my sister's door. She looked different. Not glamorous, not glowing, but stripped down. Her eyes were puffy, her face pale, her hands shaking as she clutched her phone like a lifeline. She asked to talk. Against my better judgment, I let her. She sat across from me in my sister's kitchen and launched into what I can only call a confession monologue. She admitted to the kissing. She admitted to the late-night rides, the innocent hangouts, the times she let the boundaries blur because it felt good to feel wanted. She swore she hadn't slept with Dylan, that she stopped it before it went too far. She said she wanted me back. She said we could go to therapy, rebuild, start over. I listened, silent. Then I asked one question. If I hadn't found the receipts, would you have stopped? Her eyes dropped. She didn't answer. And that was all I needed. For a while, Dylan hovered on the edges like a ghost. A mutual friend mentioned seeing them together at a bar once, then not again. Eventually, even his name stopped popping up. Maybe it fizzled. Maybe it burned out. Maybe he moved on to the next old friend. I didn't care. By then, he was just a shadow cast by someone else's choices. Life after betrayal isn't cinematic. It's paperwork, long silences, awkward explanations. It's deleting shared accounts, changing the Netflix password, splitting the furniture. It's also tiny victories. The first night I slept through without waking up at 3 a.m. replaying conversations. The first time I laughed at something stupid on TV and realized it wasn't forced. The first Saturday morning I made coffee and eggs and thought, this feels okay. When people asked what happened, I kept it simple. We weren't right for each other. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. Because the truth, that my fiancée unraveled our life chasing nostalgia with a man from high school, was too messy to package neatly. And besides, I wasn't interested in curating sympathy. What I learned is this. Betrayal rarely comes with one giant explosion. More often, it's a slow leak. A boundary ignored here, a late-night text there, a kiss excused as a mistake. By the time you notice the water pooling at your feet, the house is already rotting from the inside. And no amount of patchwork can fix a foundation that's been hollowed out by lies.